It was late at night, and I was the last one in the office. As usual, I had a ton of work to finish, so I decided to work a few hours more to complete it. I was sitting at my desk, typing away on my computer, when I heard a noise coming from the printer room. Thinking it was strange, I went to check it out, but found nothing out of the ordinary. I shrugged it off and returned to my desk. But then, the printer started to come to life on its own, printing out random pages of gibberish. I was freaked out, but I thought it was just a glitch, so I turned off the printer and went back to work. But the printer kept turning on and spewing out endless pages. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to unplug it. As soon as I did, a chilling voice echoed through the office saying, "Why did you turn me off?" I froze in fear, and that's when I noticed a faint figure standing in the corner of the room. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned office attire, with a sinister grin on her face. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was no one else in the office with me. She started to move closer to me, and I could feel her icy breath on my neck. I ran out of the office, never looking back. Since that night, I refused to work alone in the office, especially after hours. I never found out who the ghostly figure was, but I'm sure she was once a worker in that office, haunting it even after her death. I worked at a bakery for 2 years, and I had to deal with honestly the most heinous and rude customers ever. I've worked in the food service industry my whole life, and lived in Toronto up until 3 years ago, and I have never dealt with such entitlement. Anyway, one day one of our staff members quit by text message 5 minutes before her shift, and 30 minutes before we were set to open at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. We were hard-pressed finding someone to cover, so I was alone until a front-of-house person was able to come in about an hour later. I had one of the kitchen staff helping me, and all they could do was grab things and bag them as they weren't trained on cash or coffee. So here I was, running around trying to help customers, make coffees, ring people through, etc. I was clearly very stressed. This douchebag man was really annoyed that he had to wait, huffing and puffing. Eventually, he loudly exclaimed, "Forget it, I'm not waiting for this shit," and proceeded to throw his bagged muffin at my head and storm out. I legit almost chased him down. I was livid. I was working late one evening when I received an email from my boss requesting that I join an urgent meeting in the conference room. It was odd because my boss was out of town, and there were no other employees in the office besides me. But being the dutiful employee I was, I went to the conference room. As soon as I stepped into the room, I felt a cold breeze pass through me. I brushed it off, thinking it was just the air conditioning. But then, I noticed a man sitting at the head of the table facing away from me. I introduced myself and asked if he was my boss's replacement, but he didn't respond. As I got closer, I realized that the man had no face. I screamed and ran out of the room, terrified. I later found out that my boss's predecessor had died in that very conference room. Witnesses claimed to have seen his ghostly figure still holding meetings at the same time every evening. Needless to say, I never stayed late in the office again. Let me tell you a strange story that happened in an office building. Lisa, who works in HR, was staying late to finish up a big project. When she was leaving, she noticed that her co-worker Mark had left his jacket behind. She decided to take it to his apartment, which wasn't far away. When Lisa got to Mark's place, she found his door open and his jacket on the floor. She called out for him, but he wasn't there. She searched the whole apartment, but couldn't find him. Worried, she called the office, but nobody had heard from Mark. The next day, Mark still hadn't come to work. Lisa told the police he was missing. A week went by and they still couldn't find him. But weird things started happening at the office. People heard typing, and some thought they saw Mark working late at night. After 2 weeks, they found Mark in the basement of the office building, staring at his computer like he was in a trance. He couldn't remember anything from the past 2 weeks, and nobody knew what happened to him. To this day, the mystery of where Mark went and what he did remains unsolved. It was a typical Friday night at the pizza delivery store where I worked. The smell of freshly baked crust and melted cheese filled the air as we rushed to fulfill orders from hungry customers. I had been working at this store for a few months now, and while the job was not particularly glamorous, it paid the bills and provided me with some extra cash as a college student. It started as a normal delivery to a customer's house on the outskirts of town. The address was in a secluded area surrounded by trees and barely any streetlights. As I arrived at the house, I noticed the eerie silence that seemed to envelop the area. But I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination. When I rang the doorbell, the customer, a man in his mid-30s, answered with a menacing smile. His eyes seemed to follow my every move as he handed me the cash for the pizza. Something about his gaze made my skin crawl, but I ignored it and quickly left the premises. However, that was just the beginning of my nightmare. The next few nights, I noticed the same man ordering pizzas from our store. I would deliver the pizzas, and there he would be, standing at the door with that same unnerving smile. I could feel his eyes boring into me as I quickly left. But it didn't stop there. The man started showing up at the store during my shifts, always watching me from a distance. I could see him lurking outside the store, even when there were no customers around. My coworkers didn't seem to notice, but I could feel his presence and it made my skin crawl. I tried to brush it off and convince myself that it was just a coincidence, but the incidents kept piling up. The man started calling the store, asking for me specifically to deliver his pizzas. He would use different excuses, saying he was unable to pick up the pizza himself, but I knew it was just a ploy to see me. One night, as I was delivering a pizza to the same secluded house, I saw the man standing outside, waiting for me. I felt a surge of fear run through my body as I rang the doorbell. He opened the door, and I could see the madness in his eyes. He grabbed my arm, pulling me inside and locking the door behind him. I tried to scream, but he covered my mouth with his hand. He ranted about how he had been watching me for months and how he couldn't resist my beauty and charm. I was trembling with fear as he continued to talk, his grip on my arm only getting tighter. In that moment, I thought it was the end for me. But suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The man panicked and shoved me into a closet, ordering me to stay quiet. I could hear my coworker's voice on the other side, asking if everything was all right. The man reassured them that everything was fine, and they left. As soon as the man left the room, I burst out of the closet and ran for the door. I didn't look back as I sprinted to my car and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my own home. I never went back to that pizza store again. I quit my job and filed a police report, but the man was never caught. To this day, I still have nightmares about that horrific experience. I never thought that delivering pizzas could be so dangerous, but that night, I learned the hard way that you never know who could be watching you. All right, here's a story that hits close to home. Picture a dreary Monday morning. I'm heading into the office feeling off, like something's not right. I sit down at my desk and see an email from Rachel, a coworker who disappeared months ago. Weird, right? The subject says, "Important project update." I open it up, but it's not a normal update. Rachel's writing is strange and spooky. She's talking about a project we stopped working on when she left, saying she's been working on it all this time. Creepy, right? Before I can even reply, another email pops up. It's Rachel again, saying, "I see you, John." My heart's pounding now. I read the email and it's full of scary stuff, like someone's watching me. I try to tell myself it's just a joke, but I can't shake the feeling. I go over to Rachel's old desk. It's empty except for some dusty papers and her computer, still on. The screen shows pictures of her, smiling creepily at the camera. I try to call it for help, but before I can, another email comes in from Rachel, saying they won't find anything. And get this, it's sent at 3 a.m. How can she be sending emails when she's supposed to be dead? I grab my stuff and leave. That feeling of being watched follows me home. I never talk about those emails again. But sometimes, I still get them at 3 a.m., reminding me that she's still there, watching. And I know, it's not really Rachel sending those emails.